thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. The topic of today's webinar is virtual home games, impactful brand sponsorship with no live audiences. So sports are coming back, as we all know, but without fans. Based on the increasingly high number of COVID cases in North America, it's been highly publicized that each league right now is in discussions to create their own bubble. The question really remains, though, is how do leagues, teams, and sponsors respond to this? Naturally, that means that there's going to be a ton more eyeballs on viewing platforms. So things like broadcast, streaming platforms, and second screen viewing will only continue to rise in popularity. We also know there's pent-up demand. Based off of IMI's Next Wave version 7 of their research report, 71% of Canadians intend to consume live sports when it returns, and 73% of Americans intend to consume live sports when it returns. So certainly there's a significant amount of interest, which could mean a significant amount of opportunity for sponsors, which is fantastic. However, brands may think there are endless opportunities, but they will be shocked to find out how much the sponsorship landscape has changed. Based on my personal views, I don't see any fans entering sports venues in North America anytime soon. If we look back at the most recent report, the Miami Dolphins are the only national team or of the five major sports leagues that have come out and put out a public proposal that states how they're going to allow fans back into their stadium. The report states that in order to keep fans safe, they'll be limiting attendance to 15,000 people out of a stadium that has a max capacity of 65,000, which is 23% capacity. Significant drop. That's a drastic reduction in the number of fans in stadiums, which we know will have significant ramifications for sponsors. And that's just one of the implications. Therefore, brands and sponsors need to proceed with caution. First and foremost, brands need to understand their lost value since the onset of COVID. Based on a recent report from IAG, it states that there are over 120,000 active sponsorship agreements alone in the United States, spread over 5,000 brands. That's a significant amount of brands within the sponsorship space, all in the same position of having a lost value. And millions of stadium assets now no longer have any value. As a result, C-suite executives will continue to press their teams to understand their legal options and understand their partners' plans to provide make goods. Every single agreement will need to change. And there might not be enough assets to meet that demand. So even when fans do return, will fans actually flock back to stadiums in droves? We do know that traditional high-margin in-venue assets now have little to no value. Great example of this Pepsi sign here, which obviously covers an entire wall within a football stadium. Well, let's take the example of an F&B sponsor. So if there was only 23% of fans in a stadium, what does that mean for brands like Budweiser or Molson Coors, who rely on years of historical sales data to determine their direct revenue, which they will receive on site, and they use that revenue to ultimately offset the rights fees? Or apparel sponsors, companies like New Era, which have kiosks set up all across North America in venues. They're selling t-shirts, hats, socks, etc. Certainly a lot less merchandise will be sold on site. Because there will be no fans in stadiums, the highest value assets will be extremely coveted. And your brand might not be able to get them. So each sports property has partners that are bucketed by tiers. And so for simplicity's sake, we'll call it large, medium, and small, all based on their investment thresholds. So for brands that are sports properties' highest rights fee spenders, they are most likely going to get the first opportunity to secure the most coveted assets, which will include things like digital, social, broadcast, and virtual money can't buy experiences. The issue remains is that all properties only have a finite amount of inventory within those categories and will look to offset the lost value to their premium partners to start. So each of these channels have already predefined elements that are already pre-sold, things like 30-second broadcast spots, on-field signage, dedicated social posts, and mobile app integration. However, I expect to see a lot of new opportunities to emerge in the marketplace. Broadcast. Will there be sections upon sections of seats covered within stadiums, covered with tarps? Will brand messages be on masks and gloves, similar to like a jersey patch that we see in the NBA? We know for certain there will probably be continued use of virtual ring boards. To my surprise, we haven't seen a lot of innovation or sponsor integration globally. So at a Lotte Giants game in Korea, the teams named themselves after their corporate partners rather than their home cities. Or in a German soccer club, they went ahead and affixed fan likeness to their seats. And also in the KBO, which is the Korean Baseball League, they filled the stadium with stuffed animals. Certainly a massive missed opportunities by these properties. In digital, I believe that mobile game development, mobile applications, which allows for co-viewing and dedicated brand content, will be at premium. Let's take the example of what happened in March. In March, NASCAR has decided to take their game digitally when they kicked off the eNASCAR iRacing Pro Invitational Series. So iRacing is a real-life simulation where competitors get behind the wheel and race, and they race virtually around numerous tracks, including from the NASCAR schedule. The first race at Homestead, Miami became the most watched esports event on TV. And NASCAR topped their own record in the second race with over 1 million viewers for the Texas Motor Speedway. Quite significant numbers. For Money Can't Buy experiences, will there be opportunities for contest winners to meet players through video conferencing? We take the example of like a LeBron James showing up and meeting your customers inside a closed chat, and it's a complete surprise and delight. Where we also see this is when it happened with Sidney Crosby, and where Sidney Crosby came out recently and he did an open forum on a streaming channel to whereby he went out to all the Pittsburgh Penguins fans and provided a messaging and had the ability for those fans to provide some Q&A. So what does this all mean for brands? One, it's important that you understand where you stand. It's vital that all brands and leagues and properties and sponsorship agencies work together to determine that value lost to date. But the mindset needs to shift from what have we lost to what areas now meet my business objectives. For those medium and smaller size investment brands, they need to start having those difficult conversations with their properties to determine what assets may be still left on the table. Number 3 is prepare to postpone. If the selection of assets aren't appetizing, come together as true partners with your properties and determine various options as to how each party can move forward. And 4th is jump on nascent opportunities. Finding those unique opportunities, even if those opportunities aren't immediately available. So we look back in 2019 and we look at all the major sports leagues and the games they played overseas. For example, NBA, they had 10 games, MLB 8, NHL, they had 5. And we say to ourselves, wow, look at how much each of these leagues are continuing to try and drive a global audience. But if there's one league that potentially could have the upper advantage in years to come, it could be the NBA. So to date, the NBA has just dipped their toes into this international market. Post this Disney bubble, they may have no reason not to dive in head first. But it's not just about regular season games. Why don't they go ahead and create something called like an international in-season tournament? By looking at growing the numbers of fans, it's going to equate to more revenue for all parties, including leagues, owners, and players. Building that playbook is going to be instrumental in terms of how they move forward with their league. Scott Galloway said the quote, "COVID isn't a change agent, it's an accelerant." So we think about what we can mean to you and when we recover from COVID. So we look at a company like Gatorade, and we think to ourselves about how if they want to go into a new international market, or if they were struggling in a key international market and they're a league sponsor of a league, in this example, they are a league sponsor of the NBA, why wouldn't they look to use their partnership influence to increase their rights fees and become an integrated sponsor if and when the league plays a tournament in an international country? A shopper marketing program would certainly get Gatorade significant floor space at retail, and the excitement to which the NBA or the league is coming to internationally, and Gatorade could promote that, could certainly help break the tie at the shelf for sales. We certainly believe this is an area of sponsorship landscape that brands need to continue to monitor in a post-COVID world. So in closing, By trying new ways to integrate your brand now will only transcend your business well past the recovery stage. Using new platforms that incorporate technology, digital or social, in order to effectively reach their core consumer will be imperative. There is no doubt that COVID has taken a significant bite out of the sponsorship industry, but it's the brands that are agile and innovative and willing to take risks that will ultimately break through the clutter and win the hearts and minds of consumers across North America. Thank you guys for listening. We're going to move over to some Q&A right now that we have with the panel. I've had the pleasure of working with all three of you in various capacities throughout my career, so I couldn't think of a better group to be on this panel with. So the first question, I imagine that each of you in your respective organizations are having to renegotiate all of your existing sponsorship agreements. So I'm very curious to know each of your perspectives on how that is going, given that you represent leagues, brands, and properties. Jeff, why don't we start with you?
Everything is happening in real time. And I think the phrase that we've used probably kicked it to death by now is that for everything that we're going to be launching as of July 8th, it's a case of we're building the plane as we're flying it. So it's complicated because you're trying to work through value delivery to partners who are probably getting the kind of assets through something that's largely a broadcast property because there's obviously no fans in place. It can be a square peg and round hole kind of situation, and it is many times. But then, in some instances, it's opening up the kind of inventory that reaches the masses to brands that wouldn't otherwise have access to it because either they were priced out or there wasn't anything available to do it. So the long and short of it, I think, is that everything is a case-by-case situation. We need to be as empathetic as we possibly can be because there are certain businesses, certain partners of ours, likewise of our clubs, who are really struggling, have effectively had their revenue sources shut down. There are others that are in a totally different situation. And so you just need to go case by case and recognize and lean on the support of your owners or whoever it is that is making decisions at the top. That we all recognize that we're in something that's completely unique here, no one's ever dealt with before, and that we all need to treat each other as with empathy, with care, and just be genuine and open and honest and understanding as much as we can.
For sure, and Rogers is unique because although a lot of companies are bleeding, and at the beginning of all this, I was very proud to work for a company like Rogers for the things that they were able to put in place, whether it was no overage fees, no roaming, a number of different things to help the customer. So obviously right now during this time, we're not making as much money as we would otherwise. When this all started, we had a number of conversations with legal and finance, a lot of questions from our SLT on as far as, value that was lost to games played. And so we've had a number of conversations with our sport partnerships and properties that we work with, estimating the value lost because of those games. And, we've been very pleased with those conversations to date. And again, to Jeff's point, speaking with empathy, everyone's in this together. Although this isn't our first time talking about games lost, in my time at Rogers, we've seen lockout on both the NBA side as well as the NHL side, but no one's ever gone through anything like this before. So, pleased that right now we're in a place where our SLT has given us the green light to, not ask for dollars back, but as we take a look at the value, how do we create new digitally led programs, right? And carve out different opportunities with our partners. When this all started, we were presenting sponsor of a program called Leafs to Leaf at Home, where Justin Hall took over the Leafs Instagram account, interviewing various team members. And so, right now we're in the process of putting together a Celebrate and Return to Sports campaign, as well as in the early conversations of how we will show up in this new digitally led arena. And what does that second screen experience look like for fans when sports do return?
A second, then Marianne.
Yeah, I mean, for us, when it comes to the renegotiation of agreements, we didn't necessarily need to renegotiate a single agreement. A lot of our, or all of our agreements have substitution language that we've leaned upon in our conversations with our partners. But I'll take you back to kind of when the pause began. Our first focus was to connect with our partners virtually, see how they were doing, understanding that everybody's business has been impacted in different ways. We also supported partner messages in the marketplace specific to COVID relief and serving the community. All of this done in the spirit of partnership. It was not considered a make good or making up for lost value from the season pause. And it probably wasn't until about 6 to 8 weeks after the pause where we started to have make good conversations with those partners that were prepared to re-enter the market through sport. Not every partner was prepared to have that conversation, understandably, and we absolutely respect that. But for others, it was important for them to be active and participate again. So over the last number of weeks, we've focused on things like virtual experiences, various social features that have continued, as well as leaning on some rewind games that were shown on Sportsnet to deliver value to our partners based on their newfound business needs. But moving forward, what our next challenge is going to be is to work with our partners on what the future looks like. So with the return to play and next season, I would expect a lot more agreement and conversations to happen about what that looks like moving forward.
Andrew, knowing there's a potential for a second wave, what type of discussions are you having internally and with your partners to better prepare yourselves for future disruptions?
For sure. We're having a lot of different scenario planning. A lot of scenario planning is being discussed. Even if we take a look at a program like Rogers Hometown Hockey, which was proprietary to Rogers, and we've had 6 successful seasons. And for those that don't or aren't aware, it's a traveling hockey festival, free hockey festival that travels across all of Canada, and it culminates on Sunday evening with a broadcast from that community by Ron McLean and Tara Sloan. And so as we enter season 7 and what would be for the start of next hockey season, we need to plan what a pandemic phase 2 program could look like. If we're in phase 3, what does that look like? And so it's a lot of scenario planning. We're a technology company, so we have that benefit. And so a lot of experiences that were being planned out right now lead with digital first. We've previously had always been focused heavily on that one-to-one human interaction, connection, activation in footprint. But we realized sports aren't returning anytime soon with fans in the building. So we're in the process of creating experiences. How can we enable the fans to stay connected to their teams and then also allow the teams to feel supported by those fans? And so, we look forward to launching some initiatives once sports are ready to return.
Fantastic. Marianne, how has your organization looked at for new opportunities to drive community engagement and sponsorship assets over the last 3 months? I know you obviously have a space just outside of your venue called the Toyota Ticket Center. Have you had any discussions about doing things there from an activation standpoint?
I mean, community engagement over the last couple of months has been a huge focus of ours and has played a really key role in connecting with fans during the pause. We've certainly used our space in a variety of different areas. But firstly, we took the opportunity to reinforce that even while hockey was not going on, the sense of community still exists. So I'll highlight a couple things that we're doing, including some uses of our space. So firstly, our mascot, Finn, if anyone's aware of that orca whale, he has been the busiest guy in our organization, and he's been visiting countless hospitals for stick taps at 7 p.m. and done over 120 socially distanced visits for special occasions that were impacted by COVID. We also leaned on our Canucks personalities, be it players and coaches, to provide PSAs to amplify and support provincial health messages. And now we've partnered with TV actually on an initiative called the Goalhorn Salute, which provides a fan with the opportunity to come down to Rogers Arena and in a socially distanced fashion and sound the goal horn at 7 o'clock to salute and thank healthcare workers. We've also, led by the Aquilini family, our ownership group, began a program to produce about 3,500 meals per week for the Salvation Army, as well as for families in Vancouver's downtown east side. And having a building to be able to produce those meals has obviously worked well. We also ran a online 50-50 to raise funds for COVID, raising about $500,000 over the course of 2 online 50-50s. But the other role that we realized that we needed to play in this was also to offer a bit of a distraction to our fans and to continue to celebrate Canucks hockey. One quick example of that would be something that we're in market with right now, which is called the Chell Challenge. So it's hosted on NHL 20, and we have about 1,200 fans that are participating in a virtual gaming tournament. And the winner will not only get a chance to win a cash prize, but will also get to play virtually with 2 of our roster players, Thatcher Demko and Jake Virtanen. The last thing I'll highlight is that we've now opened our doors with something called the Canucks Marketplace. So while we're not using the Toyota Ticket Center space specifically, we are using the floor of our arena right now and are offering an online one-stop shop for not only signature dishes that you would expect to be able to eat at Rogers Arena, but also meal kits, working with local brands and partners. And fans can even come and drive through the ice level surface of Rogers Arena for a unique pickup service. And we're also offering delivery with that. So there's been a lot of ways in which we've been able to use our spaces, engage our partners, and support our community at the same time.
Great innovative ways of activation there. Andrew, so Rogers is always one of those like unique companies that, you know, owns professional sports teams, is a sponsor of sports teams, and also owns the broadcast rights. I like to call it internally the perfect triangle. So with no fans expected inside of stadiums for the foreseeable future, how much attention is being put towards that home viewing audience and experience? And second screen viewing will be key, as we talked about in the presentation. Great example could be the NHL Live mobile application.
Yeah, for sure. And the NHL Mobile Live, which is led by our friends on the Sportsnet side of the business, is definitely a platform that it's used heavily throughout Canada. We're excited as we roll out our 5G network here in Canada, and you know, we had plans to outfit NHL arenas to ensure that all Canadian rinks are have 5G technology, because that's kind of the first step. Once we are able to have that infrastructure in place, it'll allow us to move into the, you know, the new wave of what the next streaming app could look like and what that experience looks like. So right now we're looking at it in 2 phases. One on the broadcast side, how do we enhance the broadcast experience for fans at home, whether it's telling more stories, or it's that second screen. But the phase 2, that's where it really will come into play. So how do we build personal and customizable experiences? We know that that's going to happen at home first. Down the line, we will be, you know, there will be a plan in place of what that in-arena viewing experience looks like. But all comes back to having the foundation, and that's going to happen once we have that 5G network rolled out, and it's in Toronto and Vancouver right now. But we look to roll out throughout the rest of the country. So, you know, we're in early conversations with a number of partners of what that virtual experience will look like with the return to sport and what that virtual arena will be. And we're very excited because it's a space that ties well with our brand for sure.
Fantastic. Marianne, knowing that the NHL Hub City location has yet to be determined, it's obviously a hot topic in the news today. What advice would you give to any sponsorship marketers who are in the midst of creating their revised go-to-market strategies once a selection or a hub city is actually predetermined or selected?
Yeah, good question. We're certainly excited to hear that announcement whenever the NHL decides to make that decision. But whatever they decide, wherever they decide to play these games, NHL hub cities will essentially be neutral sites. And so no matter where those games are played, we do anticipate opportunities for our club partners to participate in the broadcast through signage elements. And based on what sort of projections we're hearing, as well as information like from your presentation, Mike, about the anticipation of games returning, we expect the broadcast audiences to be fairly large. But that being said, I don't think that the big opportunity is in signage. I think that the big opportunity for brands is to answer the question of who's going to lead the charge as we come back to sport and with the return of play. It's more about an overall strategy to re-engage fans, and it sounds like Andrew and his team at Rogers are certainly thinking that way, and answering the question of how do you use technology and the emotional connection that sport provides to position your brand in a way that maybe you weren't able to otherwise. So I believe that this pause creates opportunity. I believe it creates space for brands to jump in and make a really big impact. So just be ready to seize the opportunity, I'd say. Have a strategy, and fans are ready to engage with you. So be ready.
Fantastic. Jeff, knowing that your league is starting in approximately like 2 weeks in terms of your bubble, what details can you share about the MLS tournament that's about to start taking place?
So yeah, I mentioned that we get started on July 8th. So this is basically like think of a World Cup or any of those major knockout tournaments happening with all 26 MLS clubs in a single site, the ESPN Wide World of Sports complex. That's basically on the Disney campus. So you've got upwards of almost 2,000 people, players, coaching staff, team support staff, a whole bunch of operations staff, broadcast. Everybody all contained within a bubble. And so in the space of this, it's going to be very much hot and heavy. In the space of 30 days, we're going to have 54 matches. And for the first 2.5 weeks or so, it's going to be 2 to 3 matches a day. So it's going to kind of take over. That's the intent. But we also are trying to be cognizant of the fact that amongst the myriad player health and safety kind of factors that we're taking into account here, all of the things that we're not used to that we need to really plan heavily for. Obviously, COVID-19 being first and foremost, but there's also the more baseline things like it's Florida and it's July and August, which means we're not going to be playing at 1 p.m. So the broadcast windows are going to be, in the morning, and then the normal kind of prime times in the evening for Eastern and Pacific time. So it's going to be a lot. There's the volume of matches will be significant, but I think the important thing that we wanted to do when we're planning this, because we needed to figure out how to restart our season, and that specific term, our season. And do it in the safest way possible, which immediately leads you to single site, where you can keep everyone in an isolated environment. It was this format. We tossed around, Andrew mentioned scenario planning. It was exhaustive scenario planning. And there was a lot of things that came into play. But then we also realized that we can do something different, and we could, kind of pilot something a little bit. That led to this tournament format where we ensured that everyone could play a base number of games. Those 3 group stage games that every club will play will actually count towards regular season standings. And then ultimately at the end, the winner of this tournament will receive, there's obviously some cash that's in play, but I think probably more significantly for the club is also the opportunity to win a spot in the CONCACAF Champions League as well, which is not typically awarded through something like this. And then once we wrap this up, with the final being on August 11th, then we're hoping to return to regular season play in home club markets. Fully anticipate that being behind closed doors. and then kind of operate as many games as we can leading up through playoffs and an MLS Cup. So everything's kind of chopped up and been switched around, and the tournament's going to be the primary focus certainly for the next couple of months. But then we're going to try and get back into a cadence that things kind of are a little bit more normal. I think the other thing that I briefly mentioned during the tournament, and I mentioned that we're trying to pilot things. Among those things we're trying to pilot beyond just what the format is also what the presentation of the matches look like. Obviously, these are going to be not in the usual MLS stadiums, but rather just on pitches that have been created, kind of a modified version that's intended for broadcast. So it's not going to be the normal view, so we're not going to take the normal approach. So this is going to be a virtual environment, which we've not done in a live MLS match before, but we've kind of tested and trialed elsewhere. So that will be new. So that creates different kinds of inventory and different pieces of inventory that we can support our clubs with and our league partners with. But then that also kind of goes back into what the fan experience is. So we know that it's not going to be a normal broadcast environment, so we're not going to produce matches the way that you normally would. We're going to try and get more intimate with the way we position cameras. We're going to try and get more intimate with kind of the way that we interview players in and around games, access to coaches, all these different kinds of things, because we're not in a normal environment. So we're going to try them out, and the things that work and drive engagement, we're obviously going to keep tabs on for how we evolve things in the future. But in the meantime, we don't have any specific plans to just kind of plug and play things when we do ultimately return back to some sense of normalcy in a regular season.
Fantastic. That's a great response. This is a question for all of you, and actually our final question. So Marianne, we'll start with you. Knowing that you sit on the property side of the equation of the industry, if you could offer one piece of advice to other properties as they navigate these unprecedented times, what would that be?
My advice is going to sound a little cheesy, so bear with me. But it's something that I truly believe in, and it is that I think now presents an opportunity for properties and brands to become even closer and operate more like partners than we ever had before. Safe to say that the future of sport is going to be in technology, but I don't think anybody really has that answer today of what that's going to look like, and we're all striving to get there. But we're going to need to lean on each other in order to uncover those new opportunities, to get creative, to get innovative. And ultimately, I think we're going to come out of this stronger between properties and brands. So I guess in closing, this uncertainty presents a huge opportunity, but it's going to require the collective to identify what those opportunities are. So let's work together and figure out what we can make happen.
Fantastic. Andrew, from a brand side?
Yeah, Marianne's touched on it. We really do look at all our deals that we have as sport partnerships, right? We use the word partnerships a lot because we value the partnerships we have with our various teams and leagues. But now is the time that we can almost rewrite some of the rules and what we can and what we can't do. It's important to share your strategies with your respective partners, so that way they're understanding of what you're looking to achieve, and then together with hopefully joint objectives, you're able to build programs that meet both of your needs.
Fantastic. And then and Jeff, over to you to close this off.
So I think from the league side, and I'll speak specifically for MLS because each of the leagues, the structure is subtly different, but we are a single entity league, which means that we operate and think kind of like an enterprise with 26 kind of members. And so our role, and specifically my role in Canada, is to look after first the interests of the league, continue growing the equity in the crest, obviously continue growing the number of fans that we have. And as we drive revenue, we're doing that because it trickles down to the clubs. but also to support the clubs themselves and do everything we can to support them as they seek to generate revenue, as they serve their fans, all these different things. And then the third component of that is obviously our partners. I think that the way that Marianne put it is, I completely agree. Like this is a time where you need to work together, and I think being adversarial about really anything can get really quickly blown out of proportion, because it will come off like you're not appreciating what it is that I'm going through, or recognizing what's the world at large is going through. So this is time for reinforcing the value of relationships, because this is a point in time. I think that no one knows how long it's going to last, but I think we're all confident it's not going to last forever, and that at some point, some version of normal will return. It'll be a new version of it, undoubtedly, but it will be another version and a different state of being. And if you've done things during this period of time that might serve to poison the well, you're going to pay for it in the long run. So investing in the relationships, investing in the people, investing in the fans ultimately, that are the driver of all of our businesses collectively, then I think you're going to be better suited for the long run.
It's a great response. It lines up nicely when we talked about just how many agreements there are in the U.S. just alone at 120,000. It's a lot of conversations that need to be had between brands and those properties. So doing so from a mutually respectful level is very key.
Thank you very much, guys. I love that, and I found it super interesting. And I actually have, forget about the Slido questions. I have a slew of questions on my own. But let's just go with it. Let's go with the Zoom and the Slido questions first. So I'm going to start with one that you guys have mostly answered, so we should be able to go through it pretty quickly. But they're specifically asking about the ability of with no new fans in the stadiums. What opportunities does that create for broadcast? And specifically, are there new vantage points or new cameras that can enhance experiences on different devices and give fans new angles and new ways to engage in sports?
On the property side of things, we have heard from the NHL that it's certainly their intent that because this is different and new, why don't we do it different and new? And certainly not having fans in the building presents the opportunity to provide fans viewing at home with different angles. I wish I could provide you with more specifics. I don't know much more at this time, but I'm sure that it will look different for fans. And if we can connect their viewing experience through the broadcast with a second screen, certainly there's a lot of work being done on the Canucks app to find ways to engage with the fans and provide them with content while they're viewing the game. If it's something that is predictive in nature or something that simply allows fans to connect with one another viewing from home, I think we're going to see a lot of those things happening, not only within the NHL, but I'm sure within the MLS and other leagues that are returning without fans.
Yeah, I kind of build on that. So it's there's going to be a lot that's immediately different. The question of how long it lasts beyond the sort of the single site, the anomaly of trying to play games during a pandemic. Because I think you'll get back to we all regress to the mean. That's what we do as humans, and we also have infrastructure in place. Speaking specifically from the MLS, in 26 different venues, there's infrastructure that is designed and built with capital expenditure dollars to deliver games a certain way. So I think that kind of in the interim when we're doing things differently. The intent is very much to deliver games in a different way, and so that will be. I think we had really ambitious plans of what we could do alongside ESPN, who's going to be the host broadcaster for the MLS's back tournament, and kind of our production partner. And we wanted to do a whole bunch of really crazy things, but then I think there's also the cold reality of we're doing all these things in the middle of a pandemic, when revenue taps have been shut off largely. So we need to be responsible on the operations side, but still do things and serve fans with a different kind of experience when we have the opportunity to do so. The other thing that I think is important. So that's kind of from the fans' perspective, is how they'll consume matches. The other really important thing that we've been able to do is sort of more, on the business side of the ledger, and for a partnership marketing audience, is the virtual approach to delivering inventory in match. What it actually allows us to do is it allows us to draw a hard line around territories. So Major League Soccer has a roster of partners in the United States that's distinct from the partners that we have in Canada. And historically, that would mean, you've got physical assets, signage, digital fuel board, LEDs that we typically refer to. And that's just what the camera picks up. So if you've got, example, TFC playing NYCFC in New York, when TSN broadcasts that, they're broadcasting partners from the US. Now that we're shifting to a virtual environment, we have a distinct Canadian feed. So we no longer need to worry about any of the US partners spilling over into the Canadian marketplace. We can deliver a completely distinct, Canadian MLS environment. That's never been done before. And I think that that's probably something that would apply to most leagues. I think most Canadian properties and sponsors would get really excited about, because all of a sudden you remove conflicts, you create and free up inventory, and you can just approach things differently. So that's going to be a whole new reality for a fixed period of time. And then, if things work and it jives with what the fan experience is, then it might be a new reality that we can shift to over time.
I think what's interesting about that, Jeff, too, is that you now have assets available from an inventory perspective, both for home and away games.
That's right. Yeah. So it doesn't matter where things are played.
You are. Yeah.
But again, I think this goes back to when we shift back to an environment where infrastructure is in place. That kind of approach to a virtually delivered game requires a different set of infrastructure. And if clubs and facilities have already made a significant, 7-figure investment in different technology, we can't just dictate that they chuck that stuff in the bin and buy something new. So this is going to be an evolution, not a revolution.
There is a question that kind of links to this, which is, so based on that, what digital or virtual engagements do you think have the most potential to engage fans, and what are the best ways that you can engage fans when they're not in audience, or how do you create that in stadium experience without them? And really, that's a question that all of you can answer. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on it, but I can see that as a continuation of this one. So that's why I wanted to go to this one.
For me, creating that at-home experience, and I'm thinking of myself of when I'm actually at a game, and that co-viewing mobile application, I think from a technology perspective, if and when it arrives, will be absolutely so key, so that I can sit at my house, Andrew's sitting at his house, we're best buds, we're having a beer, and we're watching the same game, and our facial reactions, our movements are all being shared, and those noises are then being recepted into the actual stadium itself. And then how do you then intertwine brands into that message? There are endless amounts of opportunities from a sponsor integration standpoint.
Yeah, I'm watching some Premier League games recently. It seems like their ability to deliver realistic crowd noise has improved significantly since when they started games, where now there's like a pretty realistic cheer of fans when they score a goal. I agree with Michael that it is going to be about connecting some sort of second screen in order to try and mimic as best we can the experience that we're able to deliver to fans when they are in the building. So I know certainly on the Canucks side of things, I mentioned it a little bit, that the app is going to play a really big role, not only for engaging fans, but connecting partners through unique activations that will provide fans with some sort of sense of normal when we know everything feels different. We also are going to be challenging our internal departments to do things differently and come up with a crazy idea. So looking forward to share what that is when we come up with it.
I think the activation side of this is going to be the really intriguing piece. And I think that from a league level, we're largely responsible with the organization of the content and how that's delivered. The really, really intimate relationships typically exist between, the fan and their team, the fan and their club. And so we need, I think personally that our role is to be good facilitators of that. We believe that, the leagues have a role in what that fan experience is and what their fan relationship is. But the most intimate one exists, again, from between the fan and their team. So how do we facilitate that? How do we amplify? I think that's the big role that we tend to play, and what we focus on is best practices. And that's, whenever we've got clubs that are doing something that's fun, exciting, new, different, we want to use kind of our microphone and our megaphone to really kind of share that with everyone that we possibly can. Rivalries and competition is something that we know is a major driver for our fans, no matter who they're a fan of. And so that's the kind of stuff we really key in on. We were really lucky in the draw, and I mean that genuinely. We didn't have like the frozen envelope for Patrick Ewing when we did the draw for who plays who in our tournament. But we had Toronto, Montreal show up in the same group. So we know we're going to get that match. That's a huge, huge rivalry. We had LAFC and LA Galaxy show up in the same group. That's a huge rivalry. Vancouver and Seattle show up in the same group. We're going to lean on those matches because we know that they're important. And it's not just those fans that are going to be super engaged around them. It's actually also the fans of the league as a whole, because they know that there's something extra going on there. So it's that kind of thing that we want to showcase and shine a brighter light on, so that what the clubs are doing can be amplified.
I look at it in two regards. So, earlier I touched on how do we allow fans to feel more connected to their teams. And so if there's a way where we can, get user-generated content and then integrate that into the broadcast or show that in the arena somehow, so those fans are feeling supported from their teams. And then I also look at it from a digital standpoint. So, when you're at home, how do we have the virtual arena? How is it that a fan can be at home in their house, they're watching the game, and real time, there's polls, maybe there's alumni interactions. When we're going to commercial breaks, instead of watching the commercials, we're able to maybe have interactions real time with those fans off the mobile device or their laptop.
So for the last question that we'll address live, the natural extension based on what you guys were just talking about, and it's actually one of the questions, is should everyone be betting big on VR? And I'm going to add AR to that, because if you see in Mike's presentation, there was a really good example of an AR screen. And then at the same time, which I think kind of links to that, how would you see the role of athlete ambassadors changing given the space of these new technologies and the way that it comes together? So you can kind of address it as one question with two parts or two separate questions, but I think we'll conclude with that, and I would love to hear all your thoughts on that.
Prior to COVID, we were actually we were in the process of starting or conducting the first puck and player tracking test in Canada. And so we had tested that at NHL All-Star Games, and that was both primarily from a broadcast point of view, but ultimately it would, turn over to mobile devices as well. So imagine you're in the arena and you're able to put your phone up over a certain player, and you can see all the different types of stats, whether it's how fast they're skating, how much puck possession they've had, how fast they're taking each shot, etc. And so when we take a look at the user experience, and I talked earlier about we're at the point of what that second screen experience will shift to in the future. The ability that we have with the 5G network will give us that opportunity to evolve. And we've seen a ton of great AR live experiences across the globe, which we're also currently exploring. I'm not a huge fan of the VR where you need to put on the goggles, because I don't think that's going to be a an area where people are willing to consume sports, but there's definitely a ton of great opportunity as it relates to, once the 5G network is in place and across venues, that will allow the different technologies to come to life.
It's very, very interesting. The only thing I question though is everyone talked about like the recreating live sports. I mean, and Marianne, you talked about like the app being so important. You could theoretically not build a VR type, Google Cardboard experience and have an in-stadium experience at home. I don't know how effective it would be, and I'm just spitballing because your answer's got me thinking. But it's the potentials are fantastic. I don't know, Marianne, Jeff, Mike, what do you guys think?
Andrew, obviously you're much closer to, from a technology standpoint, working at Rogers, but I think there is appetite for both AR and VR at home. I think that what VR does deliver to a consumer experience, it's just such an elevated opportunity. The biggest cost there is the cost per unit. And like anything, when new technology comes out, it's so expensive, and then over time, it obviously drops in price. But certainly, I do believe that from what VR can offer to consumer, I do see assets being created, and I do see broadcasters like Rogers, Bell, whatever the case may be, looking to integrate that into their streaming.
The only thing I'll add is we've leveraged AR a couple times as a complement to an activation that we've done. We haven't leaned solely on that technology so I can see it playing a good complementary role to maybe taking an activation that we may have difficulty executing on in a fanless environment and trying to provide that to a fan in a similar fashion. AR could be used as a way to be able to accomplish that, but certainly lean on Andrew's answer to that one.
I'd say maybe just around it, I think it's not a solution for everybody. Like most things in sports, you want to start at the core and then work your way out with what your strategy is. These kinds of things, I think, are when it requires additional effort, additional investment of time or money from fans to take part. It's going to be the ones that are the diehards, the really hardcores that are going to do it. And then as the further you get away from that, the less impact, less interest there's going to be. So if it's a strategy that's going to serve them and that's really meaningful for you as a property or as a sponsor, then awesome, that's great. But if you're trying to reinvent the wheel and define a new way for all of your fans to watch something, I think I'd kind of side of that. I don't think that we're going to shift that in that direction all that quickly.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time, for your thoughts. They were enlightening. I'm very excited, Jeff, to see what's coming because you're really the first
guinea pig
sport to go, and so I'm very excited to see what's next. But hockey is a short follow, and Andrew, you're going to be everywhere, I imagine. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a fantastic day, and we will see you at a future webinar.